Thank you for joining us in our latest installment of our Artist Talk series. Today we sat down with Terrie Corbett, who is featured in our Mélange exhibition alongside Nancy Dillen and Grace Leal. Working in Tallahassee, Florida, Terrie Corbett uses traditional painting and drawing techniques combined with personal mark making to create abstract and expressive pieces. Terrie Corbett works intuitively and in different mediums, including encaustic, oil and wax, and layered graphite. The work shown and discussed in this video is available for purchase in the gallery and online at www.venviartgallery.com. And with that, we hope you enjoy. So, how did the name Mélange for the show title come about between you and the other two artists in the showcase?
Well, actually, Brenda named the show. And after she sent us the title of the show, I decided to look it up. And of course, it means a mixture, a medley of things. And I thought that was doubly interesting because Grace and Nancy and our work complements each other, but it is different. There's an intensity to Grace's work, the beautiful color of Nancy's work. My work has some energy on the surface. Definitely. So I think it was really a wonderful title, and I was really glad.
That's great. Yeah, I think it's really encompasses all three artists really well and just makes a nice show to put together.
It does. It really does.
So the pieces you chose, these are some of the pieces on display. We have a number of other pieces that are not seen past the camera, but did you choose these pieces for a specific reason?
I did. As a matter of fact, taking the title of the show, meaning mixture, meaning medley, and I do work on different surfaces. I work with different mediums, so I chose some of my pieces that were on canvas in acrylic. I chose most of my work is on cradle board, and so a lot of those. And I used some of the energized surfaces, some of the color. I mixed up the tools that I used, so I tried to pick those pieces that best represented the title. And then when we brought them in, we did a little more editing.
Nice.
And so I think it resolved very nicely.
I agree.
Thank you.
And then regarding your material choices and the materials you use, what influences that choice, and how do you go about deciding the materials you use? How do you switch between them for each work? Like, what's your thought process in that?
Well, I'll go downstairs, and there may be a day that I feel like working with encaustic. So I'll go to my encaustic station, turn on all of the heating implements that I need, which are quite a few.
Yeah.
And choose the surface I feel like painting on. You know, my husband builds all my cradle boards, so nice. I have a lot of variety, and I might work in that area. If I feel like I want to work with oil and coal wax, I'll go to that station and choose the paints and the implements that I'll use for that. Some days I want to work with collage, and then I go to yet a different station. We've got a large studio.
That's awesome.
And we used to work in glass. So we actually have 8 of the 9 kilns that we used to have still down there.
Wow, that's awesome.
So it's about 900 square feet, and there's plenty of room to work. So, it's mainly just go down there and choose what I feel like working on that day.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah. Oh, that must be such a nice space to just express whatever you're feeling on the day.
It is.
How lovely.
Thank you. It's a wreck right now.
That's okay. They're always a wreck after you make some great stuff.
It's a working space, right?
Yeah.
And we share a studio, so that's good too.
So just double the art, double the mess. We love it.
There you go.
And how did you? So you said you used to work in glass. How did you begin creating and then find your way into this style, which is a bit different from glass?
Oh yes. Well, I actually started with painting. And I didn't really start painting until after I got an academic degree in history, and I was offered a teaching fellowship, and I had taken art history classes as my electives on my history degree. So I thought as soon as I finished this degree, I was also tutoring for the federal government at that time, so I thought as soon as I finish this degree, I'm going to take some painting classes. So I was talking to the chairman of the history department, and he told me at that time that he wanted me a year from that date. He said, I want you to have a first draft of your thesis. And of course, this was plus teaching.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I really wanted to take some painting classes if we could spread that out a little bit. And he looked at me and he said, forget the painting. So later that afternoon, I went to the history department and turned down the teaching fellowship.
Wow.
And went down to the art department and signed up for BFA.
Wow.
Yeah. So I really didn't start painting until probably, like I said, my first year. And I had dabbled a little bit. I'd never had any real art classes, but I dabbled a little bit in pastels. Like in elementary school, I won a couple of, they'd send me out to draw. So I won a couple of little awards there. And I illustrated my report on David Copperfield, which my English teacher loved. But really, as far as any lessons, I did not have any, but I loved art history. And my art history professor, Daryl Patrick, was a real important influence. And Gaddis Giesland, who was my major professor when I started painting. But it's a long time ago.
Yeah. Cool. That's awesome, though. You've been doing it since you were a kid. And it just like continues to flourish and elevate. So from painting, you went to glass.
I went to glass. I saw some glass. I just love it. It was fused glass. It's glass that's fused in a kiln. It's not like hot glass where you put it on
like blowing it.
Right. It's not blown glass. But we did that for probably 4 or 5 years. And actually, I was lucky enough. I won third place in an international glass award.
Wow.
Yeah, because I actually was taking vitreous enamels and painting on the glass.
Ooh.
It's a little different because once the glass is heated and the paints start flowing, I mean, I paint a certain image. And then when it comes out of the kiln, sometimes it looks that way. Sometimes
it does not. The kiln has its own magic.
It does. But we did that for about 4 or 5 years. My husband did too. And it was a lot of fun. But then I kind of came back to my roots and started painting again.
Very cool. And going into some more specific of your works, your Color of Music series.
Right.
That is very prevalent throughout this exhibit.
Right.
How did you create that? What was your setup like? What was your process like?
Well, it came about, my husband was in the music business for the first 25 years we were married. So I've been around music all my life. We both met because of music, as a matter of fact. But anyway, sometimes I'll hear something and it inspires me. You know, I think, oh gosh, that sounds like so much pretty blue and magenta. Or sometimes I'll be painting something and I'll look at it when it's finished and think, wow, this looks like House of the Rising Sun. So it's kind of a twofer. Sometimes I come to it ahead of time. I hear it, I'm inspired by it. Sometimes I do the painting and it just speaks to me as a title.
Yeah.
So it can go either way.
Very cool. That's such a fun way to work.
It is.
That's awesome. So is your process in general pretty similar to that? Very much the feel, the, I guess, vibe of the moment, the day, the sounds?
It is. It's almost like a visual jazz. You know, in other words, I sit down and start painting, and one stroke elicits the next stroke, and it's pretty spontaneous. But of course, that spontaneity comes about from years of having studied. So you bring a certain set of skills.
Yes.
And then you improvise.
That's awesome. So your studio you were able to like section off your studio into these different areas. That's so incredible. You could like really dedicate that space and keep your mess a little, because I know encaustic
it takes up a lot of space.
Takes up a lot of space and creates a bit of a mess.
Right, it does. And I not only paint with encaustic, I do encaustic monotypes. So I have a Polaroid hot box, which I draw on it with the encaustic materials and then take a monotype off of it.
Wow.
So I have probably a 12-foot bar, like in a kitchen. You know? And so I have the pigments that are heated, the palette that's heated, the hot box that's heated, heat guns, and I work with a torch. You know, it's called painting with fire. And a lot of times I'll take that torch and just literally paint with the torch.
Wow. That's awesome.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. With your setup, you have your pans with all your pigments and your encaustics melting and your acrylic paints as well in a different area. When your process of choosing and layering colors, is that also pretty intuitive, or do you come with a bit of a plan, or is it kind of like a combination?
I sometimes come with a feeling, maybe an idea of the palette I want to use.
Yeah.
But I have been layering since my first year in art school. So that is a real natural thing. It happened, it originally happened because I would be using all these colors and not really having the skill set to make them work together. So I would glaze over it to unite the surface so that I could see the images better, get rid of all the conflicting things that were happening. So I initially used it as a helpmate, but now I use it because it creates such beautiful color depth that I really want to keep doing that. So I'll go in with opaques, but then I'll go in with transparents and do a lot of layering like that. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
That's great. And then with your layering of colors, there's a lot of also mark making you do.
Oh, yeah.
And revealing so many colors that are underneath. That the process of that is also pretty intuitive.
It is, and it's more of a reductive painting. In other words, I'll go in with a lot of different pigments, create a lot of color depth, and then I may go in with something that will take the surface back. Or if I'm working with oil paint, I can take it back right then because the paint is still wet.
Yeah, totally.
And so that's a kind of a reductive type of painting. And I use everything. I use gouges, to go really deep into the surface because, as I said, most of the work is on cradle boards. I also use a lot of charcoal, crayons, not magic markers, but different kind of markers, Stabilos, woodies, just a lot of different things to just, you have that white surface and you're like, oh no. So you want to do something to kind of get rid of that. So I always start a painting with using different mark making tools and rubbing down and making the surface not light anymore.
Yeah. Cool. Very interesting. And what are your hopes for viewers to take away when encountering or viewing your work? Because there's just so much color and movement and energy within each piece. What do you hope for people to
Well,
feel?
I love that you said that because I do hope that they see the energy that was involved. I do hope they see that there is a lot of gestural marks. I like to think that they can look at the piece several different times and see something new. A lot of times, especially if I'm working on a bigger painting, I'll take a little, just go like this and look at different sections of it because I always think that's fun to see, okay, this would have made a nice little painting, just this area right here. So I hope that they have questions about it. I hope they go beyond the familiar that they know and open up and see something different and maybe accept it. They don't have to like it, but at least accept that it's something different that they're not familiar with.
Yeah.
So, I'm pleased when people have questions about it too. So I appreciate your questions.
Yeah, they spark so much curiosity because just looking at them, you could very much feel the movement with each piece has such a unique movement to it, and I think people will have a lot of questions when wanting to delve deeper into them because
that's the fun part.
Yeah, the questions are endless. It's awesome. So, do you have any advice for aspiring artists or people hoping to join the arts?
Well, I think what I would probably say is don't wait to be inspired. If you want to be a painter, that's what you've got to do. Go in there and paint, even if you don't feel like it. If you don't feel like you've got 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 hours to paint, go down there and paint for an hour. If you don't feel like I don't want to pick up a brush, I don't want to pick up a mark making tool, go down in your studio and just be in there. Be at peace in there. Things will come to you.
Super true.
Perfect is the enemy of good. So don't try to be perfect, And as I said before, don't wait to be inspired. Just go down there and do it.
That's actually such amazing advice because I'm the type that if I'm not feeling it, I'm just like not feeling it. But just being in the space, being around your materials really does make a huge difference. That is great advice. Yeah. So to wrap up, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share? Any closing statements you'd like to give about your work or about you or about the show?
Well, I think that you can't see too much art. I think you need to go to as many shows as you can. Even if it's something you don't think you're going to like. You don't have to like all parts of I particularly love the abstract expressionists.
Mhm.
That was what influenced me.
Mhm.
I loved Willem de Kooning. I loved Lee Krasner, Pollock's wife.
Yeah.
I loved Elaine de Kooning.
Yeah.
I loved Helen Frankenthaler. But you don't have to just look in art history books. You can go out today and see a lot of different things going on. Expose yourself to as much as you can. Keep an open mind about what you're seeing. You can love the Impressionists, you can love the Abstract Expressionists, but keep an open mind about what you're seeing and try to take in what the artist is trying to tell you and make it an enjoyable experience.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's phenomenal advice as well. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us and for having this interview with us. We appreciate your time and your art. Filling our gallery walls is incredible. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Angelica, and I thank you, and I thank Brenda and Veer. There's a beautiful gallery here. I'm really glad to see you as the new manager, and you've been so helpful to me since I've been here. So thank you very much.